This is a story about life groups. About this time last year, I remember feeling that my life was missing something. I felt lost and disconnected. One day, while I was driving down the road, I passed this church. Right away, something told me that this would be a great place to get connected. It wasn't long before I found myself walking into a busy lobby every Sunday. At first, it was exciting just to be a part of all the momentum. But after a while, I realized I didn't know many of the faces I was seeing. Somehow, I still felt disconnected in the midst of all these people. Then, I heard about life groups and how I could make friends with people I didn't know. I have to admit that I hesitated a little, but signing up and joining a life group was a great decision. For me, it was the place I truly got connected. A lot of people, like me, have concerns about joining a life group. Like, what if the host has a talking parrot that keeps hurling insults at me? Or what if the leader only speaks in Pig Latin? What if our first icebreaker is fire walking? Or worse yet, there's bad coffee? As soon as I walked in the door, I realized all those fears were ridiculous. I've made some lasting friendships and deepened my faith. And just like that, this growing church, for me, grew smaller.
Amen. Well, Eastern Hills, welcome to Life Group Sunday. This is a Sunday when we focus on trying to get as many of you as possible into a life group. And we do these in semesters, and so they kind of have a beginning and the end, and then we take some breaks. But Dan, this is an important thing. And this is, by the way, we have so many new faces. I think that this is a good time. This is Dan Rogers. If you don't know who Dan is, some of you probably actually don't. Dan is our family life minister, and one of his responsibilities among his main responsibility is making sure stuff happens. He's highly administrative. If something happens around here, Dan probably had a hand in making sure that it happened. But also one of his areas of responsibilities is life groups. And so he's going to be up there today, and we're going to be talking about how important it is and encouraging you to take part in this. And Dan, I think last year we talked about it's almost like 60 to 70% of our church is involved in a life group. Is that right?
That's correct.
I mean, that's a pretty good number, but it's not 100. So there are some of you that still have it. And again, I mean, it's scary. I mean, this is, in some ways, this is safer, right? Because you can kind of hide in a crowd a little bit, and I understand that. But you get into a smaller group, and, you know, it can be scary for some folks.
Sure. Gary and I were talking this morning about snake handling, and that's a much later class or whatever.
Yeah, we don't do that for a whole 6 months before. But we promise you it would be a good thing. So Dan, I'm just going to ask you a few questions here. How long has Eastern Hills been doing life groups, and what was, the first time that life groups were initiated, what was the reason behind it?
Okay. That's a great question. We've been doing life groups for almost 30 years now, and I have been involved since the inception of that, and have been blessed to be here and part of this congregation for that long, actually longer than that. Life groups were born out of a leadership decision to try and say, at one point, congregations, basically, if you were to ask a preacher, well, how's your congregation doing? They would say something like, well, our attendance on Sunday morning is X. And, our contribution is, so they measured nickels and noses, I think is the way we sometimes refer to it.
Nickels and noses, I like
that. Yes. But we wanted something better to help us kind of gauge where we were as a congregation, where we were as far as individuals and disciples who are followers of Jesus. And so we said, is there a way to do that? Where we can actually see where our people are and how are they growing individually as well as a congregation. How are we doing as a congregation? So one of the things that we looked at was we said, okay, worship attendance is a very real thing for us to know. And so we do actually take attendance here, by the way, during worship. So we asked the question, are you growing in your devotion and your adoration of Jesus and of God and of His Spirit? And so we can look and oftentimes we say, okay, worship is one of those variables that we measure. But then there was also, we said beyond that, How about, are you growing in ministry? Our goal for everyone in here is to be involved in some kind of ministry. Whether that's a weekly, a monthly, or a biannually deal or whatever, we don't care. We would love for you to be involved in some kind of ministry. We know that that's something that will challenge you to be more than just, okay, I am an individual who's here absorbing something, I'm giving back. So are you serving somewhere? And then the third one was, are you growing in your relationships with one another and with Jesus? And so that's fellowship, just like we were doing this morning in the back.
Great.
I love the buzz in this room
I
this
do too.
morning. It says something about the fact that you want to be together. And so we said, how many people are involved in relationships beyond just coming in and occupying a space and a seat? And then the fourth thing that goes along with that is the opportunity to share the good news of Jesus. So are we impacting our community, our city, our county, our state, our country, our world? And are people involved in mission? Are they working in, so there's opportunities like we just mentioned, the soup kitchen. Mm-hmm. That's one of those places we get a chance to connect with folks. So that's where life groups give us that opportunity to apply the preaching and the teaching that goes on in our Bible classes out in the community, out together as we work and learn together.
You know, at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, if you remember there in Matthew, I believe Matthew chapter 7, it talks about Jesus does this long sermon from Matthew chapter 5 through Matthew chapter 7, and at the end he does that story of the wise and foolish builder. Built your house on the rock and the sand. Some of you kids know that. Hey, Jesus gang over here, y'all know the wise and foolish builder? Yeah, okay, all right. So, you know, as we look at that, you know the difference between the wise and foolish builder was one thing. The wise builder heard something and actually put it into practice. Mm-hmm. And I think life groups is a place. I mean, it's literally hard to do in Bible class or especially in a sermon for you to actually put something into practice within these four walls. But in a life group and in a neighborhood, I mean, it's so much easier to be able to do that. And so it takes it. And I want to hit one more thing. You talked about evangelism. I think most people I want you to hit it a little bit more. I think most people would think evangelism is obviously sharing the good news of Jesus, but as far as an invite to something, I would think most of these folks say, well, we invite them to church first and then a life group. Is that necessarily true?
No, it's not. I mean, in fact, if you're meeting in your home or you're meeting at a restaurant or wherever it may be as far as your life group, you are having an impact on those people around you. And certainly your neighbors would pay attention to that and would be more than welcome probably to come into your home. So, yes, it is I think I told you that, some people think if they ever show up in the church building, the roof's going to fall in. All right? Yeah, some of you may have been there or whatever. They don't feel that way. I've never heard anybody mention that at home. Hey, well, if your roof's going to fall in if I ever show up at your house, so. Yeah.
And actually, there'll be quite a few people who would actually come to a life group that will not come to an assembly like this. So keep that in mind. Okay, Dan, I just want us to go through all of our life groups. I think we have 7. Is that right? So kind of just give them just a quick overview of them, and I might chime in here and there.
Okay, let's bring up that first picture there. This is actually the McGraw, Spears, Emmels group.
Wow, they're overachievers. They need 3 leaders. Yeah. Wow, okay.
Well, you do see it's Lake Athens area, and these guys are pinpointed around different parts of Lake Athens, and that was part of our original idea with that they would have some impact, not only just in our congregation, but also in that community. And so that's one, mostly empty nesters, but they also have their teens and families is their target group. So if you've got teens, this is one that we would really highly encourage you. Both Tim and Mark work specifically with our teens some, and so they're connected not only to the teens but to the parents as well. So that would be that group.
And they meet at 5:30. I'm assuming they're meeting at 5:30 today, and of course you get their information in the back. So that's good. Great. Next.
All right. Young families hosted by the Bells and the Singletons. It is actually at the Bells place. You got to love this about a family. The Bells have the gift of hospitality to the 11th degree. Some of it could be maybe a 9 or a 10. They're 11 and 12 and above, okay? So they built their house specifically to be able to host a group there and have a place for the kids to be as well. And so I love that about them. And you notice they meet 4 to 6. That's also so that the parents can come, bring their kids, do life together, and get them home and ready to go to bed so they'll be ready for school the next day. So that's an awesome thing. Bells and Singletons, I wanted to say one of the things that I love about the life groups here with where they are, this is an opportunity. A lot of these guys are leading this group, and Randy has been really good about pushing them out there and saying, hey, take an opportunity to teach and to lead this group. So that's an encouraging thing.
And so I think they have they have childcare that's available there, and I think they actually have curriculum for the kids, and they have like 2 different sets for the older kids and the younger kids. And Shannon and I volunteered to watch the kids, and your kids are okay; they're not too bad. No, it was good. And so this has been a shining spot in our church. Actually, I mean our Kingdom Kids ministry. Obviously, the team has done an incredible job, but also this life group's played a part in that as well. I mean, we had 40-something kids here this morning.
Yeah.
That means we probably have about 50 or so people in this demographic in our church.
And that have something to figure out what to do with the kids is oftentimes the Achilles heel of life groups. And so I'm so thankful that the Bells and Singletons are providing that as an opportunity. It really is good.
All right. What's our next one?
All right, Dees and Holton. Ray is a newcomer to our hosting here. Now, he's very well acquainted with leading and teaching, but I'm so excited that he has volunteered to come alongside Dave and Debbie. These are empty nesters. They meet here at our building. I'm going to go ahead and say this one because I think it's important. Our groups, some of them, we would love for them all to meet in homes all the time.
Sure.
It's just a unique opportunity to do life and be a part of somebody's home and that atmosphere. But we've also found that meeting at the building here has its benefit. And I really thank you who come back in. And if I started, I could sit here and name people. We have about a third of our congregation that lives inside the Loop of Athens. Do you realize that, folks? About a third live inside the Loop. Everybody else is out further than that. So this group, David and Debbie, drive in from Highway 19 South. The Holtons are out Safari Waters. The Bufords are attending that 19 North. And just so everybody is driving multiple miles twice a day. And so we try to have some of our groups that meet here so that...
Got to have a central location.
Yes, yeah. So that's one for you, and do a great job. They meet upstairs Sundays at 5:30.
Cool thing about this group is I believe, Dan, this is the oldest life group in existence as far as the people who kind of attend it.
Not the oldest members.
Not old.
But, yeah.
I didn't mean it in the form of gray hair. Well, that's true too, but that's not what I meant. It's actually, I remember my grandmother attending this life group.
That's correct.
And she's been gone a long time, so it's this has been around a while. So, all right, next one.
Barry and Connie Bilger meet here. Again, here's another group that they've got folks coming in from different places or whatever. Barry teaches a very unique class. He is a great thinker.
He's a lawyer. That's good.
Has a ministry background and then went into law, actually. And so he is a great thinker. He's very challenging in that way. They meet here at the building. They will not meet this week, I believe, because there's stuff going on in a couple of places. But ordinarily, they will meet here probably in the well starting next Sunday. So, yeah, it's a good group.
Especially if you like to debate. This is a great, because they like to disagree with each other and sharpen each other in that way. And so it's a fun group. My parents actually go to this group. That's why I know that. It's good. Next.
All right. Don and Janet Bridges also meet here Sunday evenings. They've got just older youth, so I love that. Don's, again, another one of those good thinkers. He's going to really challenge you a lot. And they meet down the hall in our Kindness Hall Sundays at 4:30. And if you wanted to come, they've got some singles, some couples in there. It's a good group.
It's awesome. Yeah. Next group.
Davis Roberts group. Okay, so Danny and Kathy and Wayne and Karen on this one. And the reason it doesn't have a location, because they vary theirs up. Linda Passmore hosts some. The Roberts will host some this time. And so they'll meet in some different locations or whatever. So take note of those phone numbers. right, Danny? Because if you want to, he will text you where they're going to be and let you know. So, and y'all are going to meet this evening. That's correct. So, at the Bridges house. The Bridges are in multiple groups, by the way. They
I think they're in 3.
Yeah. In addition to leading one, they attend a couple of them, so it's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's a great group, and this one's a growing group, so this was a great one to get involved with as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and the next one, I think it's the last one, maybe?
Yep. Well, let's see. The couple on the top picture there, I can tell you about them. That other one, Now, let me tell you about this group. We had some conversation last year, actually, and had great success with this, and so we decided to actually kind of launch it a little bit further publicly. But we know that many of you obviously connect with the preacher oftentimes. That's one of the first faces and names that you'll get the chance to know. And so we said, what if we came up with an opportunity for people to stay for lunch and visit and get to know the preacher better, but also they have that shared in common that they're all new to the congregation, whether they place membership and they're new in that way, or whether they haven't even, they're still exploring what does it mean to look like and be a part of Eastern Hills. And so we said, let's try this. And it went across phenomenally well.
Yeah, it was amazing. And this is for people that, obviously, if you're visiting this morning, and this is your first time, you're invited to lunch. We're meeting, go out these doors and to the right, and we've got a set up over here this morning. And there's a meal for every visitor, and Shannon and I will be there, the Markhams will be there. And this is also, though, for those of you who've recently placed membership in the last couple of years even, but really haven't gotten plugged in yet. This is for you. To come. And you know, one of the things that I love, and I don't know if the Williams are here, my cousin, Kim and Denise Williams, they came to this group there, and they connected. You know, they knew us, and they knew my family, but they hit it off with, Philip and Leslie, and they hit it up with Toy and Roy, and actually started working in the Kingdom Kids, and it's just something, if you just had a hard time, getting plugged in, this is the group for you. And now I'm going to say this is probably a doorway and not a destination. And so what we'll probably do is have you in this group for a semester or two. And then we're going to either start a new group or we'll actually kind of find you a group. But this is a place that you can come and connect, get involved, and then we'll find you a place within this church.
It's a great place to ask questions as well.
It is a great
because
place.
That way you can say, well, what do you mean being a member, or what does it mean to do, And so it's a great place for people to ask questions because you have all that in common.
That's exactly right.
With everybody else in there, you're kind of on the same footing.
Right. So, okay, that's all of our life groups. And so, again, please go afterwards. And everyone's got cards you can hand out that has all this information that you can do it. And all of them, I think but one, are meeting today. So I'm just encouraging you, make the most of it as it's today, all right? And get involved in the life group. Dan, here's another question. Why are life groups so central, so important to the church life here at Eastern Hills?
Well, I think one of the things, if you were here at Bible class time this morning, this section right here where Aspen and Shannon and going all the way to the back was almost full. In fact, it was very full. There were 80-something people in here. You can't get to know people in that kind of a setting. Even our Bible classes, as
large.
good as they are pretty large. You're 30, 35 people in there, and it's hard to get to know people individually, and you don't get a chance to share questions. So the flex of life groups still gives us an opportunity to, number one, ask questions, get to know people better. It's smaller numbers. You can build relationships better, and more personal. I think are the things that I would say are important about that.
Absolutely, because we're not just about you checking a box, okay? Yeah. No religious boxes around here to check. Okay, I came to Sunday morning, I took communion and all that. That is not the kingdom of God, folks. Those things are important. This gathering right here is like a family reunion we get to come to every week and see what God's doing amongst us large. But if we're not getting in each other's lives, if we're not walking together, I mean, that's what I read all through the New Testament.
There's another component that I think is very important that we talk about when we talk about life groups, and that is Boy, we haven't even got to the scriptures yet, have we?
We're coming up next.
Okay.
You want to hold off on that?
No. This is still important. I'll go ahead and say it now. One of the questions that we're trying to work together as leadership, both our elders and as a staff as well, we want to ask the question oftentimes, when you have a need in your family, a family member sick or whatever it is, one of the first questions we want to ask you is what life group do you attend? Because one of the things that happens, as I mentioned in the very first part of talking about the initiation of life groups, was that we could take better care of each other. It's the first point of contact we would like for you to be involved in, and you minister to and be ministered to.
You know, one of the things that breaks my heart is I love to love on people, but sometimes, you know, there's different people in the hospital or different things going on, and I can't keep up with it all, folks. I can't keep up with 300 people, right? The elders, you know, we it's our job, and we're here and we're engaged, but we can't do it. We can't cover all the bases. People are going to fall through the cracks and not get the spiritual care that they need unless something like this happens, where there's 15 of you or 10 of you and you're in each other's lives and you're visiting the hospitals. You're there for each other at times of loss and pain and disappointment. And we've got to get smaller. We've got to get it on a more organic level, or people will fall through the cracks.
Yeah, I'll give you, for instance, my grandson Riley fell a week or so ago and bumped his head and had a concussion. He's 19 months old, and the first folks that my wife contacted were some of our life group folks and said, hey, I want you to be praying for my son and daughter-in-law and son, grandson. So, yeah, it's an immediate point of contact.
So let's talk biblically.
Okay.
We're each going to share our favorite verse concerning fellowship and life groups. So, Dan, what's yours?
I actually didn't do one. I did a passage, but I'll go ahead and share it. So, Acts chapter 2, 42 through 47. Stay with me on this. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes, ate together with glad and sincere hearts, and praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved.
Love that passage.
So, I want to ask a question, or two actually. I'm not asking for a show of hands, but I do want to ask you a question. And it's this. There are some non-negotiables in our heritage, in our faith, and maybe for you. So I'll ask you this, okay? If I were to say we're going to worship, but we're not going to take the Lord's Supper on a weekly basis, would that be for some of you, that's like, what? Are you sure? No way. I'm not going to negotiate that. I love our heritage in taking the Lord's Supper on a weekly basis. That was mentioned in there. They broke bread together. How about prayer? What if we just said, prayer, it's okay, but
it's overrated.
Really,
praying to God.
We don't need to pray, especially during worship times. Again, is that a check mark for you, or you go, no, that's a non-negotiable for me? How about teaching or preaching? Is that, would you be okay? Y'all don't answer this. I told you don't raise your hand up.
Hey, I can go get another job. I was looking when I found this one. It's all right.
If we said, okay, right after communion, we'll sing a few more songs and we're done for the day. Some of you'd feel shorted, wouldn't you, that we didn't have that opportunity for preaching or teaching. Those are non-negotiables. But
there's something else in that list, though.
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
Did you notice fellowship is in that same list of things? Would you say that's a non-negotiable? Oh, no, I'm coming for the fellowship. He says they devoted themselves to the fellowship, to the apostles' teaching, the breaking of bread into prayer. I think that's so very important.
And and I love that word devotion. Just to interrupt you real quick.
Go ahead.
Because, if you go into a life group, you have to make a decision. I'm going to go to church, and I'm going to go meet people. I'm not going to be the last one that comes in and the first one. You have to make an effort. And even when you go to life group, okay, just like anything else, you're going to get what you're willing to give. Mm-hmm. If you're willing to be vulnerable, if you're willing to get in there and meet people and be courageous, then you're going to receive something in return. And it has to be something that you're devoted to.
Yeah.
And then you'll receive the benefit of it.
You know, I think it's interesting, and oftentimes we can brush aside the fact that they had some opportunities we didn't have, meeting daily. But you notice that they met in temple courts and they met in homes. And that's so very important. I think the gathering of worship is important, but I think also that smaller group setting was very much intentional in how they grew as a church. Every day they met together. We don't have that advantage today. It's much more difficult for us to do that. So that means that life group is that much more important. All right? I'll say it again. We don't have the opportunity to meet daily like they did, most of us. But that time of together, of, even, one time a week is so very important to share that opportunity.
In the West, we are such an individualistic society. It's about and this is, you ever heard this? It's about my personal relationship with God. Okay, I understand what you're saying when you say that, and there's some truth to that. It is about it needs to be personal to you, but what you're saying is it's about me individually. I don't read that in the New Testament at all. Everything happens within the context of community. Everything happens, your spiritual growth, your understanding, okay? Everything happens not in a vacuum in the church. It happens with us together. As you go, we go. Either we're a family and we're going to grow together, or we're going to get stagnant. It's not something you can do by yourself, just from a theological standpoint.
You've got a favorite passage.
Okay,
as well.
my turn.
Go
All right, here we go. 1 John chapter 1, verse 7. I did just pick one verse. Okay, here we go. But if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, his son, purifies us from all sin. At the heart of this passage is the word fellowship, but look at what's around it. As if these kinds of things happen in fellowship. What I love when the Apostle John, as an old man, is writing this, he's saying, hey, we've got to live in the light with each other. It's time to quit hiding stuff. Okay? Because God is light. And if our relationship is going to be based upon him, it means that we're going to have to do this thing that is a bad word to most people. Be vulnerable. And you know what vulnerability is? It's courageous. You know what vulnerability is? It's a risk. Because when you're vulnerable, people might mishandle that. Right? Because people are imperfect. They might not follow up with it when you share your heart and what's really, really going on in your life. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't take the courageous step of sharing anyway what's really going on. And as much as we need to pray for your great aunt's ingrown toenail, maybe we can pray for your kids. Maybe we can pray for your heart. Maybe we can pray for your marriage that's struggling. Maybe we can pray for the doubts that you have that you've never told anyone about. You see, my heart in life groups is that we do what it says. We'll actually create a safe enough place where we'll actually share our lives with each other, what's really going on, the nitty-gritty, and that we'll gather around each other in that light and we'll pray for each other. And the last part of that passage said this, and it'll purify us from all sins. You ever thought about your forgiveness being a communal event? That it's not just about you and your sinning. That's just between me and God. No, it's not. Just between you and God. Say that to a family member, right? If a family is close-knit, when one hurts, we all hurt. When one sins, it all affects us. When one becomes a victim to something, we all become a victim to something, because that's what family is. And so what we need to do is find our healing not isolated alone in our bedrooms or even our closets, our prayer closets with God. But if I read the New Testament correctly, I believe that we're supposed to live a life wide open. Now, use discernment and choose if it's a safe place or not, but that's our heart, Dan, is that these life groups will become a sanctuary. That it'll be a safe place for you to share your stuff, a safe place to be with God and his people. And that's our heart as we go through this. I'm going to close with this. In Luke chapter 15, it's one of my favorite chapters in the Bible because it's all those lost kingdom parables. The lost coin, the lost son, you know what I'm talking about? And the theme of all these stories that Jesus is telling is this: hey, boy, isn't it great when the lost come home? When you lose something that's of such precious value and you find it, you throw a party, especially when that's a person. Has anybody in here ever experienced a child who left the faith, who went their own way, at least for a season? And some of you have had the extreme experience and the joy of that person coming back to the faith, coming back home, so to speak, right? And the joy of that. I grew up in this town, but more importantly, I grew up in this church. And in 1992, when I graduated, I left, went to college, and I did my adulting, and came back for a few years and was a youth minister and then left again. But for most of my adult life, I was away from this place until recently. But there's something I always knew, Dan. I could always come home. And you wouldn't judge me. And even though I had failures, and even though I messed up, even though I was disappointed, I always knew. Of course, I have a biological family that I can always come home to, right? That's true. But I have a spiritual family. And I'm telling you, for those of you who are newer to this place, I would love for this to be your home. Because they have proven to me throughout the years that this can be family. And everybody wants and needs family. They need a place to belong. So to any of you out there, can I just say one thing? Welcome home. You are welcome here. This can be your home. And Life Groups is a part of that. So we're going to sing a song now, and if anyone needs prayers in any way, Dan and I will both be down front as we stand and sing.
Oh, you